Imaginons le monde en
Let's try and
2025.
imagine the world in 2025.
Une population urbaine deux
An
fois
urban
plus nombreuse.
population that will be
Deux fois
twice
plus
as
de
large as
richesses
it is currently,
Une demande en énergie
twice as
deux
much
fois plus
wealth
importante.
produced, energy demand that is twice
Deux
as
fois
large,
plus de millionnaires,
and
deux fois plus riches. Le
twice
nombre
as
de
many
personnes qui
millionaires,
n'ont pas accès
twice
à l'eau
as
potable,
wealthy,
deux fois plus. Et le nombre
twice
de
as
déchets produits quotidiennement,
many people not
deux
having
fois plus
access to
également.
drinking water, and
D'ici
twice
à
as much
2025,
waste produced every
Nous
single
allons
day.
être deux fois plus riches
So we'll be
et consommer deux fois plus de ressources naturelles, tout en étant deux fois plus
Double the-
inégalitaires et deux fois plus polluants.
we will be doubly rich at that point in time, and we'll be polluting doubly.
Nous faisons
So we'll be
comme si
twice
les
as
ressources
wealthy and twice as
naturelles étaient
polluting. It's as
inépuisables.
if our natural
Depuis 2 siècles,
resources were
nous nous comportons comme si la
inexhaustible.
ressource humaine
We've been
était un
acting
bien
that way
rare.
for so many centuries.
En réalité, nous vivons la tête à l'envers.
However,
Ce
we're
cadre
walking on our
pensé est
heads.
profondément
That's not the way to
ancré
do it.
dans les précédentes révolutions industrielles.
If you look at
Mais ce n'est pas un ordre
the
naturel
industrial revolutions that have taken place over time, it's not a natural order of things. It was individual and collective decisions that were taken that seemed to be reasonable and seemed to make sense at the time, seemed to be in favor of people's well-being and welfare,
ou plutôt ce désordre,
but
est une
it led
véritable
to
épée de Damoclès au-dessus de
chaos,
notre tête.
disorder. It's
À
like
tel point qu'on pourrait presque
the sword of
prendre
Damocles
au pied de la
hanging
lettre
over our
ces
heads.
projections de la NASA.
NASA's
Civilisation est
projections
sur le point de
about our
s'effondrer à cause
civilization
d'une pression
say
insoutenable
that we're about to
sur les ressources
collapse.
naturelles.
We're about to collapse because we are exerting pressure on our natural resources, and the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer.
Nous n'avons plus le choix.
So we've
Nous
no
devons faire la
choice.
révolution.
We've got to embark
pas
on
la
this
révolution au
revolution,
sens
but
de
not just
renversement
a revolution in terms of
forcié,
turning the
ni un
tables on the
retour
past
à
or
un
making
Éden
sweeping
protectioniste
changes.
fantasmé.
No,
Non.
no.
Ce dont nous
We're
avons
talking
besoin,
about
c'est d'un bouleversement de
creating
notre cadre de pensée.
upheavals in the way we think in our mindset. We've got to think totally out of the box.
Et cette nouvelle culture,
And this new
c'est
culture
celle de la valorisation,
is the
de la
culture
préservation et de l'optimisation
of
de toutes ces
preserving,
ressources.
optimizing, and
que nous n'avons
recovering
plus
all
le
of these
droit de
resources
négliger.
that we cannot neglect anymore and cannot waste anymore.
En voici 4 qui me paraissent essentielles.
Here are 4 that I think are
La première
key.
est incroyablement
The first one
abondante. Elle est tout autour de moi.
is
C'est notre
terribly
intelligence à
abundant.
tous.
It's our intelligence.
Grâce aux
It's all
réseaux
over the
sociaux
place.
et à la
Thanks to
technologie,
social
il n'a jamais été
networks
aussi
and
facile
technology, it's
de
never
mettre nos
been
capacités en
so
commun.
easy to
Et
pool
notre
our
inventivité collective
capabilities.
pourrait bien être la clé à nombre de nos problèmes.
If we're all smart together, it can
On se
open
mette à
the
coopérer
door
et qu'on arrête de
to
jouer à la
finding
guerre
solutions. We've
permanente
got to
en dressant
stop
des barrières
fighting with each other,
artificielles.
stop with these standoffs. We've got to stop
Cela,
creating
César
artificial
Arada
barriers. We've
l'a
got
très
to
bien
all work
compris.
collectively
Cet
together.
ingénieur
And
franco-japonais
this
a mis au point
Franco-Japanese
Protéi.
engineer
Protéi est un drone
understood what it's all
marin,
about. This
écologique,
is an
open
ecological
source,
marine drone,
low-tech
an
et
open source, low-tech
Il tire derrière
device.
lui une longue traîne qui
And
absorbe le pétrole.
It
grâce à la
actually
force
absorbs
combinée du vent et des
oil
vagues.
thanks to the combined
Mais c'est surtout
force of
le
wind
mode de développement
and
de Protéi
wave
qui est original.
power.
Il a été mis au point
But
par une communauté
this device was
éparpillée aux
devised
4
by
coins du monde,
a
rassemblant
community,
marins, chercheurs, ingénieurs, entrepreneurs,
a
industriels.
crowdsource, really.
Cette
It was
communauté est
engineers,
toujours
everybody all
active et
together.
active
It was
sa créativité au service de
crowdsourced.
solutions
And
open source.
it's an open source solution for the oceans, in favor of the oceans and their well-being. Let's talk about open source.
Le code source ouvert est au fondement de cette seconde ressource que je voudrais évoquer.
Open source is really the cornerstone of what I want to talk about. That is free movement and free use of knowledge. It's the structure that makes it possible to bring forth our collective intelligence. The principle is simple. Knowledge is a common good, and it should be able to be taken ownership of by everybody without financial barriers that would be excessive. It's like Creative Commons. The idea is to share knowledge so as to engender even more knowledge, even more creativity.
Même Elon Musk, le fondateur de
Even
Tesla
Elon
Motors,
Musk,
l'un des fabricants automobiles les plus innovants au monde,
Elon Musk,
l'a bien
the
compris. Depuis
founder
juin
of Tesla
2014,
Motors,
nous pouvons tous utiliser les brevets de Tesla
knows
sans
that
risque.
since June 2014, anybody can use their patent without
Voilà
any
pour les
risk of being
ressources
taken to
matérielles.
court.
Mais passons maintenant
So
au
they're the immaterial resources.
La
What
troisième
about the
ressource,
physical
elle est
resources?
également tout autour de nous. Ce sont les biens qui ont déjà
The
été
third
produits.
resource, it's
Il s'agit
the
d'éviter
goods
d'en
that have
produire de
already been
nouveaux et de
produced.
gaspiller de nouvelles ressources
Before producing new products and wasting resources, we should use the existing legacy or the capital we have fully. For example, look at car sharing, carpooling, so as to optimize the property we have. BlaBlaCar is European champion in carpooling. It transports 2 million people per month. And they don't own any single car, not one single car. And then there's the car-sharing service in San Francisco that thought that in 2013, according to the figures they had, their users generated savings of 30,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions. But we won't stop generating waste overnight. That won't happen. Each French person produces more than 450 kilos of waste per annum. But if waste is reused in one way or another and is put back into the production cycle, it can become a resource. This is the fourth kind of resource I want to talk about. When you can't avoid producing waste upstream, when you can't avoid it at source, you've got to reuse the waste that you've generated, or recycle it at least. And there's a 3D printer called Wafat that's made only using electronic waste. You may have heard of that.
All these projects are key players in the cultural overhaul that we need so much. They're created spontaneously by people on the ground, and they are gradually changing into movements. Some people say that this is the embryo of a new paradigm, an economic paradigm that involves the collaborative economy, the circular economy, the product service economy, and the knowledge economy. These are the four pillars of the resource revolution. These are at the root of what could be a sustainable alternative production system. So the notion of an alternative sustainable system is here at the root of the Fab Labs. A Fab Lab is an area where things are open and the public is provided with many different tools and facilities that are computer controlled. It's in the urban fabric, it's collaborative, and with these facilities you can create many objects from the most basic project to the most sophisticated connected object. Upstream of production, the ambition is to consider sustainability, reuse, and repairability as key elements of the object's DNA. These objects are built in small series, they're scalable, they can be reused and repaired by anyone. This is facilitated by the existence of an international knowledge-sharing community that pools the designs, the blueprints on an open-source basis. And this, of course, leads to uncharted territories when it comes to building and reusing many different kinds of objects. I, for one, am deeply convinced that these initiatives are the very beginning of an alternative sustainable production system. But we have to be honest about this. This is just a nascent movement. It's going to take a few years before this actually accounts for even a small part of our production requirements. In order to achieve the shift towards a global sustainable system, we need those people who now control industrial organizations and waste management operations. We need the large corporations and the public authorities in order to initiate a large-scale transition. We need those people who are not used to agile change. So how can we get them moving? How can we urge them to invest colossal amounts of money to overhaul a whole system which is pretty efficient? Well, in their regard, from their point of view, it's pretty efficient. Well, the good news is that these economic paradigms that I showed you hold considerable potential in terms of savings. All you need to have is a long-term, somewhat radical vision. This long-term vision is what led Ellen MacArthur, one of the most famous British women of the sea, to create the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which wishes to bring about a radical radical new paradigm based on the circular economy. Ellen MacArthur became aware of the finite nature of resources, especially in the middle of the ocean, 4,000 nautical miles away from the nearest civilization. Everything on board is counted to them in very minute terms. So she transposed this idea to our economic system. What we extract from nature, we produce, and we produce waste. This is a linear way of doing things, but of course it cannot last. On the contrary, all the resources that we use should be naturally given back to nature or repaired or recycled. But the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is very pragmatic. In her latest report in 2014, she presents an action plan. The economic potential is, listen to this, $500 million in net profit, 100,000 net jobs created, and avoidance of 100 million tons of waste recovery within 5 years. This runs against the idea that sustainable economic operations go against growth and profit. Campanori in Italy, they've initiated a zero waste approach. In 2007, the aim is to drastically minimize waste, especially those that are not reused or recycled. 2 years later, 2009, Campanori achieved €2 million in savings that were reinvested into new facilities. And the equipment made it possible to cut the waste collection bill by 20% for the citizens, and many jobs were created. Well, contrary to what traditional economists believe, this may be not enough. This may not be enough. What you need is a social environmental vision, of course. The case of Patagonia is a shining example. Quite a case in point. This is a California-based organization that was created in 1973, and it manufactures technical clothing using recycled material only. The social environmental mission is clearly embedded in its strategy. Therefore, the decision it sometimes makes may seem to go against its immediate economic interest. For example, they encourage customers to buy used clothing instead of new clothing. But according to Patagonia's managers, this irrational or apparently irrational behavior is at the heart of sustainability. And it leads to much better behavioral patterns, both on the part of customers and employees. So all these examples, Patagonia, the Ellen MacArthur, Campanori, and many others that I cannot mention for lack of time, are a definite source of inspiration for us. Unfortunately, there are not enough of these examples. It won't be enough if one or two companies move on to the circular economy. It won't be enough if just a handful of towns and cities decide to go for zero waste. All local distributed initiatives will not be enough to move on to the third industrial revolution. The revolution of resources will result from all these actions, not multiplied by 2, but by 1,000, by 1 million, by 1 billion. Today, we need to become aware that cosmetic operations are not enough. What we need is a total warfare strategy, and the Resource Revolution Tour is the first sounding alarm in this battle, which is beginning.